Puck around and find out.
The Detroit Red Wings are off to an absolute heater to start the season. They're 5-1-0 on the year, which has tied them for the second most points in the NHL, alongside Boston and Colorado behind the Vegas Golden Knights. And I would hazard to guess that even the most ardent Detroit Red Wings supporter who thought that this team was going to take a leap forward this year didn't think they would take a leap this big this soon. I myself thought that the Red Wings would improve from last year, but still narrowly miss the playoffs. But right now, they look like one of the best teams in the NHL, so how the heck did that happen? In my opinion, in reviewing all of the Red Wings games and just looking at the numbers, there's really three big reasons why the Red Wings are doing so well to start the season, and they also kind of reveal whether or not this hot start is going to be sustainable, or if the Red Wings might fizzle out and fall back to earth. Reason number one is the big man himself, Alex DeBrincat, who is leading the NHL in points with 12 and goals with 8. I absolutely loved the DeBrincat acquisition over the summer. I said it was one of the sneaky best moves of the entire offseason, and that Stevie Y had pulled a rabbit out of his hat, kind of like he did with Sergachev at Tampa. But compared to the rest of his 6-year history in the NHL, DeBrincat is just playing at a completely different level, and kind of an unsustainable one in my opinion. Obviously, nobody's expecting him to keep up with this torrid pace he's on to start the season, which would end up with him having 109 goals and 164 points. He's going to come down to earth, but the question is just how far back down to earth he's going to come. According to the advanced statistics website MoneyPuck, while DeBrincat scored 8 goals in his first 6 games, his expected goals based on the quality of his shots is actually 2.4. That's 37th in the NHL, behind guys like Troy Terry, Connor Bedard, Mikko Rantanen, and Brandon Hagel of the Tampa Bay Lightning. His goals above expected 6 games into the year, meaning the difference between the number of goals that an average shooter would get given the quality of his shots and the number of goals he's actually scored, is 5.6. Nobody in the NHL is above 3. And even if you take into account his shooting talent, which MoneyPuck actually can do in a separate statistic called goals above shooting talent, he still leads the NHL by a whole 2 goals over the next closest player. In short, the fancy stats say that DeBrincat should have scored between 2 and 3 goals to start the season, but in reality he scored 8. And in looking at all of his goals myself, I noticed that he has had a couple of very lucky goals, an odd deflection, a seeing eye puck, and an empty net goal, but the other goals that he scored, which have been off of high quality shots and chances, were set up by his teammate Dylan Larkin. And Larkin himself is actually second in the NHL in points with 11, but his goals above expected is actually 0, meaning he is scoring the exact number of goals that the math would project him to score, which is why Larkin is the number 2 reason on my list as to why the Red Wings are doing really well to start the season. Dylan Larkin is just plain good. Even if his production is a bit inflated, DeBrincat is clearly the best winger that Larkin's ever gotten the chance to play with, and his productivity is reflecting that. While his assists might dip down a little bit as DeBrincat's goal scoring goes down, I think he's going to continue to produce, and this is going to end up being a breakout year for Dylan Larkin, who's going to probably, in my estimation, be a 90-point player this year. Now, for DeBrincat, his expected goals per 60 estimates that he will end up getting somewhere around 38 to 40 goals this year, which is in line with his peak productivity over the course of his career. So while I think that DeBrincat will cool off and probably end up having a very good year for him and a probably all-star level year for anybody, Dylan Larkin, I think, is about to take the next step by virtue of being paired with DeBrincat. Larkin's production is all legit, and I think it's going to continue for the rest of the year. But the third reason why the Red Wings are off to such a hot start, and the biggest reason, in my opinion, is that their goaltending has been
adequate.
Wouldn't it be adequate?
In my Red Wings preview, when I broke down why I didn't think Detroit would end up making the playoffs, the biggest reason that stood out was their goaltending. I didn't trust in either Ville Husso or James Reimer to step up and be a starting level quality goaltender, which is frankly what the Red Wings need to be able to get into the playoff. Now, before all you Red Wings fans jump down my throat and say, see, we told you that Ville Husso was actually a really good goaltender, slow your roll. According to MoneyPuck, in his 4 games played, his goal saved above expected is 0.2, and his save percentage above expected is 0.001. His 9.01 save percentage is 33rd in the NHL, and his 3.04 GAA is 31st. So what do all these stats mean? Basically, they mean that Ville Husso has been as good as expected. He has stopped the shots that he is supposed to stop, and that is actually a huge upgrade from what he was last year. In 2022, Ville Husso had the 6th lowest goals saved above expected in the NHL, with negative 14.7 goals saved above expected, meaning he let in 15 more goals than he should have. His save percentage above expected, which was negative 0.005, was slightly better in terms of rankings. It was the 19th worst, but still, the fact of the matter is that Ville Husso has been playing adequately this year, which has been good enough to keep Detroit in the win column. So, in terms of sustainability, do I think the Red Wings are going to just continue to plow along like an unstoppable freight train and win? Honestly, no. The Brinkett scoring is going to come down, and even though Dylan Larkin's productivity is going to remain pretty constant, he'll lose a few assists when DeBrincat stops scoring. The problem still remains Ville Husso. Is this the level that we can expect from him all year, or is he going to regress back to what he was last year, and this was just a hot, quote-unquote, start? Now, there is certainly the possibility that Ville Husso has improved over the summer, and that he is playing at a good enough level to backstop the Red Wings into the playoffs, and maybe DeBrincat's pairing with Larkin will propel him to a new height of goal scoring he hasn't reached in his career. That's certainly a possibility. But if you're asking me to bet the farm on that, I wouldn't do so right now. However, Red Wings fans should definitely be encouraged, because this hot start to keep them in the playoff race when that inevitable cold spell comes. Shane Pinto is about to be suspended 41 games, half of the season. Now, obviously, this is a massive suspension, half of an NHL season, and Shane Pinto is not even on an NHL roster. He has to sign a qualifying offer with the Ottawa Senators in order to begin serving that suspension. And that's kind of insane that the NHL is imposing a suspension on a player who is not on an NHL active roster, but what's even more insane is the fact that Shane Pinto apparently did not bet on any NHL games and is still getting this heavy of suspension. That's right, according to a statement released by the NHL's official PR account, Shane Pinto is suspended for 41 games for activities related to sports wagering. The league's investigation found no evidence that Pinto made any wagers on NHL games. So I'm guessing that Shane Pinto must have bet on other sports, like maybe NBA or NFL games. At the worst, he bet on like minor league hockey games, but the question I have is, why does the NHL care if Shane Pinto bet on other sports games? And from a recent report from the Ottawa Sun-Times by Bruce Gerrich, it looks like the impetus for this ban actually came from the NHL's gambling partners themselves. Quote, "This is important because it goes to the integrity of the game," a league source told this newspaper Thursday. "It's the appearance of impropriety that's the problem. You can't have that as a league. Once you start to tarnish the system, especially with your new partners in the gambling world, it's not good. You've kicked the wrong hornet's nest, the appearance of integrity in games." Whoa. It goes on to say that league sources say Pinto's online gambling account in the United States was flagged by a company that is a partner of the league because of unusual activity, and it contacted the NHL's head office recently. So it seems like one of the gambling partners with the NHL noticed that Shane Pinto had unusual activity on his gambling account, which was not related to NHL games, and contacted the NHL as a result. To me, if we're talking about the integrity of the game, this seems incredibly suspect to have a gambling account get flagged, and then instead of taking the proper procedures, which I'm guessing would normally be to just deactivate the account or block it, or maybe put it under scrutiny to see if it, was breaking terms of service or something like that, that they contact the NHL, which has no relation to this matter other than employing the player and getting him suspended. It would be like if FanDuel saw that I had unusual activity on my account and then contacted my boss and told them that they needed to fire me or put me on suspension. To me, this all seems very icky, and I hope that Shane Pinto doesn't have his career completely undone because of this one decision. Alright, we're well into the third week of the NHL season, so let's go ahead and look at the pyramid of power. As opposed to a traditional power ranking, we're going to do a pyramid scheme where we have the teams at the top who are the best, filtering down to more teams at each level who are at various different lower tiers of play throughout this season. So we'll start at the very tippy top, and we used to have only one team in the first tier, but I added another team this year. The Colorado Avalanche have been playing out of their minds. Up until they played the Pittsburgh Penguins, they hadn't lost a game. They are one of the most dominant teams in terms of puck possession in the NHL. Their expected goal differential is over 10. Nobody else's is over 6. They've obviously got a lot of threats who can score both up front and on the back end. Georgiev is playing out of his mind, much better than I anticipated, and if they keep this up, the Avs are going to be a tough team to unseat as one of the top contenders for the Stanley Cup down the line. Now in Tier 2, I got the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. And I know, it seems ridiculous to have the Hurricanes up this high given their early year struggles, but they remain one of the best possession teams in the NHL in their own right. The problem has been that they have not gotten any good goaltending out of Freddie Anderson for their first 6 to 7 games of the year. Now that he's starting to return to form, Carolina Hurricanes are packing up those wins. I think both they and the Rangers are going to be the top of the Metro Division in that second tier. Third tier I have is the Dallas Stars, Boston Bruins, the Edmonton Oilers, and the Vegas Golden Knights. I know everybody's expecting the Oilers should be down in that bottom tier because of how dreadful their performance has been, but the Oilers have so much talent. I just cannot fathom having them down in these lower tiers. Like, this team should not be this bad. Even their underlying metrics are not terrible. Like, their expected goal differential is minus 0.42. That's not that terrible. They've gotten horrible goaltending, like horrific goaltending. They should be better than they are. And when McDavid comes back, I think there's going to be a stretch where they rattle off a bunch of wins. But it's definitely concerning, their play so far. Moving on to Tier 4, these are the last of the solidified playoff level teams. I got the Ottawa Senators, Minnesota Wild, Pittsburgh Penguins, Vancouver Canucks, Nashville Predators, New Jersey Devils, and Winnipeg Jets. And again, people are going to wonder, Pittsburgh and Nashville, how are they this high up? They both have losing records. Again, I expected both of them would be much stronger teams coming into this year. And again, just like Carolina, both of their underlying analytics are not that terrible. The Penguins are actually one of the best possession teams in the NHL, and the difference between their expected goals versus their actual goals scored and given up is astronomical. Like, as much as I hate the Penguins, they should not be this bad. They've gotten bad goaltending. They have not been able to score when they should. It's just been unfortunate. And sort of the same can go for the Nashville Predators, although I think they, more so than the Penguins, are closer to what their record reflects. So they're at the bottom of this fourth tier, and I think they could continue to slip if they don't see things turn around. But I just can't imagine that UC Saros will continue to play this poorly, and that this forward core will just continue to be unable to score. Like, their leading goal scorers so far this year are Tommy Novak and Colton Sissons. Philip Forsberg has 1 goal and 5 points this year. Ryan O'Reilly has 2 goals and 4 points. Like, that should absolutely not continue. Next, we go down to Tier 5. These are the teams that I would say are fringe playoff teams. At least a couple of them will probably make the playoffs. We have the LA Kings, Buffalo Sabres, Calgary Flames, St. Louis Blues, Detroit Red Wings, Washington Capitals, New York Islanders, and Florida Panthers. A lot of people will be shocked that the Panthers and Red Wings are so low here, and that the Sabres, Flames, and Blues are so high. Again, this is still going off of the ELO system that I use to predict the team's point totals before the season, so that they should move a lot more early in the season. But again, for a lot of these teams, this sample size just is not big enough for me to make the determination that, like, oh yeah, the Flames are actually trash. Like, they actually just don't have good players. And that the Flyers, who are off to a just ridiculously hot start compared to what we expected from them, they're actually just a much better team, even though they have the same basic roster and coaching from last year. And speaking of the Flyers, they are down in that bottom tier, along with Columbus, Tampa Bay, Seattle, Montreal, San Jose, Arizona, and Chicago. Everybody will probably raise their eyebrows at Philadelphia, but also Tampa down here. The thing about Tampa is that, yes, they have gotten out to a very impressive start, especially more so impressive due to the fact that they don't have Andrei Vasilevsky. But Tampa Bay has the highest expected goals allowed of any team in the NHL. They're expected to have more goals scored against them than the San Jose Sharks, who are the worst team in hockey. And yet, they've only given up 24 goals on the season, which is still like bottom third of the NHL, but is not as bad as it should be. And yes, Jonas Johansson just did have back-to-back shutouts. Everybody's clowning on me for calling him one of the worst goaltenders in the NHL, but man, I'm just not going to take the out here. I'm doubling down. I don't think he's that good. I think eventually those goals are going to start going through. And when they do, Tampa Bay is going to start giving up more goals like they should. Maybe I'm going to look stupid. Maybe Jonas Johansson actually is the next coming of Vasilevsky, and he'll carry them through to the playoffs. If he keeps playing like this, 100% Tampa can make the playoffs and go deep. But with Johansson and with the quality of chances that they are giving up, because again, this is just not just on him, this is their team defense, which has been horrendous. If this keeps up, Tampa Bay is going to start to lose games. So there you have it. That's the pyramid of power for week 2 of the NHL season. All right, let's do some listener questions. JJ Snots 7593 asks, NHL teams, and if you're surprised by their start, which I'm guessing he's asking, which NHL teams I'm surprised by their start, either better than I expected or worse. So I've got a few teams that I talked about in my power pyramid, but I'll expand on them a little bit more here. The big ones that have really surprised me, obviously Edmonton has to be at the top of the list. This is a team that has the talent that they should be in competition for the President's Trophy for the top of the division, and they are really struggling. As of October 28th, when I'm recording this, they have 1 win, 5 losses, and 1 tie, a .214 points percentage, which is second worst in the NHL. It's ahead of only the San Jose Sharks, who look like they could be one of the worst teams in NHL history. And if we're being honest, the reason that the Edmonton Oilers have been so bad to start this season is almost entirely because of their goaltending. Both Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner have appeared in 4 games this season. Campbell has a goals against average of .435 and a save percentage of .878, which is really bad. Like a 90 save percentage is probably around average. So anything below that is pretty suspect. But somehow Stuart Skinner with an .846 save percentage and a .939 GAA might actually be worse. So the Oilers are giving up over 4 goals a game, the 3rd most in the NHL. But this is all being compounded by the fact that they also can't score. Now, Draisaitl and McDavid are doing their best. Draisaitl has 11 points in 7 games. McDavid had 8 in 5 games before he went down with an injury, and obviously that injury hurts them. But here's an incredible fact. The Edmonton Oilers only have 10 players who have scored a point this season. A goal or an assist in 7 games, only 10 players have a point. Guys like Connor Brown, Matthias Janmark, Brett Kulak, Derek Ryan, Brian McLeod, Eric Desjardins, no points through 7 games of the season. And you don't expect those guys to be point-a-game contributors or even 40-point guys, but you need to get more than no points in 7 games. So how do the Oilers turn things around? I honestly don't know. They definitely need better goaltending. They need Connor McDavid back from injury, but even with him in the lineup, they weren't winning games. Even with him and Draisaitl putting up points, they're not winning games. The only thing I can say is they just need to get better goaltending so we can actually properly evaluate this team, because they give up just so many goals and their goaltenders are stopping so few shots that it's really hard to understand whether or not the Oilers need defense, need more offense, or both. On the positive side, though, a team that has started much better than I anticipated is obviously the Philadelphia Flyers. Right now, their record is 4 wins, 2 losses, 1 overtime shootout loss, a .643 points percentage, and in all honesty, I don't know what to make of the Philadelphia Flyers. They're obviously getting great goaltending from Carter Hart, who has always had that ability, just hasn't been able to string it together. They're getting depth scoring throughout their lineup. They're getting very good play from their defensemen. But the thing is, when you look at the teams that they have beaten, Columbus Blue Jackets, the flailing Edmonton Oilers, and then 2 admittedly impressive wins over the Canucks and the Minnesota Wild, and they have a chance in the next 2 weeks to really start to rack up some wins. They're going to play the Hurricanes and the Sabres twice, the Kings, Sharks, and Ducks. Those are, 6 games where I think they could be favored to win at least 4 of them, maybe 5. So could we get to a point at Thanksgiving where the Flyers are in contention at the top of the Metro Division? Certainly seems possible, and that's a sentence I wouldn't have dared to say at the beginning of this year. But I'm really going to be interested to see how they continue to progress, because when watching their games, they have spurts where they look really impressive, but then there are also spurts where I'm like, Yeah, that's kind of what I expected from the Flyers before this season. You know, it's been a lot of a confluence of factors just coming together at the right time with goaltending, defensive play, Konecny stepping up, getting some timely goals. But I don't know, there's something about the Flyers that I'm not quite sold on them yet. And then one other team that has shocked me with how bad they have been this year is the Calgary Flames. I had the Flames narrowly missing out on a playoff spot, and right now they are just barely ahead of the Oilers and the Sharks in terms of their points percentage. They have a record of 2 wins, 5 losses, 1 OT shootout loss. And I mean, if you want to talk about a group that has lost some very on-paper winnable games, the Flames are Exhibit A. They've lost to the Penguins, Capitals, Blue Jackets, Red Wings, and Blues. And I know the Red Wings are off to a hot start, but in my opinion, the Flames have more talent on paper coming into this season, I thought, than the Red Wings do. But what's really shocking is when you look at some of the underlying numbers regarding Calgary, it doesn't make sense that they're this bad. They've gotten good goaltending from Jacob Markstrom. Not exceptional, but he has a save percentage over 90. And they're actually one of the best teams in the NHL in terms of Corsi for. They're getting their scoring chances. They're not giving up that many bad opportunities, but they're just not converting on their opportunities. They have a lot of guys who are producing at a solid rate. They got, Mangiapane, Huberdeau, Ruzickin, Hanifin, Lindholm, Coleman, all putting in some good production, multiple points. They've got 17 guys who have a point this year. They just, for whatever reason, are unable to convert the opportunities that they're getting. Their team shooting percentage is 6.7. It is second worst in the NHL, ahead of only, you guessed it, San Jose Sharks. So the Flames, their start has been terrible, yes, but I also have some hope that at some point the shots will start falling for the Flames and they'll start winning some of these games that they should be winning. But man, it is really frustrating if you're a Calgary Flames fan to watch your teams just win the possession battle all night long and end up on the wrong side of the score sheet.